Let's go. So thanks everyone for joining today. So we're doing an AMA, which is an Ask Me Anything with Suzanne Ferguson about the fact versus fiction of the architect exam, in particular probably about the CTA Review Board, as we see a lot of questions pop up there.
Thank you so much, Lilith, for inviting me too. I'm super excited. I turned my camera off just because we have lots of slides and lots of presentations. So yes, thank you so much. I know there's been a lot of things in the community.
Yeah, indeed. And that's exactly why we wanted to have a session with Suzanne. So Suzanne, shall I introduce you, or maybe you can say a few words? I think everyone knows who you are though, but
I'm happy to say a few words. So I'm the Global Director for the Architect Program, and most recently a part of the Architect Credential team. So we'll have lots of new and exciting things coming this coming year. So we're really excited to be focusing more on Architect. And so I'm here to help answer any questions that may be floating around regarding the Architect Evaluation, which is the first step, and the Architect Review Board exam, which is the second step for the CTA credential.
And thank you so much for being here. I know I already bombarded you with a lot of questions. Most of them made them on the slides, so we have a lot of good stuff to go over. And I'm, of course, Lilith van Biezen. I will be your host today. So I will be moderating the chat and also, maybe interacting, adding a bit here and there with Suzanne, because, of course, I'm very much interested in this topic as well. But before we started, just a few words on, what is SAIMA. So we are just a group trying to support one another. We have no affiliation with Salesforce. So everything that we bring is our opinion. And as you will see also a bit throughout, it's always best to check official sources for any information. So, just FYI on any of the sessions that we do. Some housekeeping rules is please mute yourself. If you have any questions, feel free to put them on the chat. And then, we at SAIMA, we try to do the best, but as you can already see with some of the scheduling hiccups that I mentioned in the beginning, we're not perfect. So if we make another mistake, also feel free to let us know. Or if you want to present or host something, also please reach out. We love to have some new faces here and there. And then let's get to today's topic. So the Ask Me Anything with Suzanne Ferguson, and we will jump in. So Suzanne, I will give you some statements, and then you will tell me if they're fact or fiction. All good?
No problem. Yes, that sounds great. And then also, I think, Lilith, too, you said if anyone has any questions, use the chat. If you didn't put your question in the document that Lilith provided in LinkedIn, please feel free to drop it in the chat, or there'll be another way for you to ask questions at the end as well. And, we can always answer any questions we don't get to after. That's not a problem.
Yeah, and also I think I showed in my last post, and it's also in the resources that we have at the end. There's the office hours as well, which Suzanne's team organizes, where there's always room to ask questions there too. So this is just kind of a sneak peek or a little taste of what you can get there as well. So the first statement that we have heard in the community is you need to follow a template and mention specific keywords. So is this fact or fiction?
I'm going to ask everybody on the line, put down what you think it is. Is it fact or fiction? So I just want to see a little bit of what's going on in the chat before I answer this. But that's a great question. We get that all the time. Interesting. Fiction, factual fiction. Okay. Everyone thinks it's factual fiction. Interesting. All right. If you want to click on the slide, Lilith, it is. And one more time. Fiction. Yes. So you've got to make it your own, right? Every scenario may be different. So there's no templates for this. You're solving a solution that the customer has requirements for. If you're thinking about a solution, you definitely, when you're practicing, you might have a general template in mind, but that has to be adjusted for the situation that is in front of you. So it cannot be a template. Now, some people think that I'll just write it down and then you forget to go back. Well, that's just a generic answer. That's not going to relate back to the requirements. It's really important for you not to use a template. You can use it as you're thinking through solutions, but when you get to the review board or to the evaluation, it should be based on the requirements in front of you. We see this quite a bit, so definitely something to watch.
And we get a good question from Stuart in the chat, or just a clarification that keywords, jargon can sometimes help explain and make the communication easier. So I think it's not that Suzanne means. It doesn't mean that you can't use specific terminology which pertains to, the concept that you're trying to explain. It's just, you don't have to treat them like buzzwords. So they have to have meaning, and as Suzanne explained, they have to pertain to the scenario. They have to be relevant. Does that cover it?
Yes, correct. It means that, you can't just say, I'm going to use skinny tables and not explain why, and not be able to go into that deeper level and thinking that if I say a word, it's going to help me. It's going to be okay. Similar to a template, it's just one part of, what we're expecting from you at this level of exam.
All right, let's go to the next one. So you need to prepare specific artifacts is the next statement. Do you want to open it up?
Yeah, I want to see what people think of this one. Is it specific artifacts that we're looking for? Interesting. Okay, let's click on it. People are going to be surprised. Fiction. It is not specific. It's not specific. You have to prepare artifacts that are complementary to the requirements, right? So if a artifact is necessary to help you explain something, you should prepare it. We're not looking for 10 artifacts in every presentation. So it depends. It's up to you to determine which artifacts you will need to help you present. Some people do 2, some people do none, some people do 20. I've seen up to 30. It varies. So you do not need to prepare specific artifacts.
Yeah,
I'm glad I helped everyone out on that one, because everyone thought that was true.
Yeah, indeed. And I think this one also, I mean, it's as you mentioned, it's about how you want to present certain things. I know I played around with which artifacts, I found useful, or which supported what I needed to discuss. But yeah, it's really important always to make sure they're relevant to the story that you're going to bring, and the story that you're going to bring should be relevant to the scenario that you're bringing. So, and that's where you need to be careful that those artifacts don't start because you think I need to have all of these dominate the story. But we have another question on that one too.
Well, we see that quite a bit actually. And so people spend too much time on the artifacts, and then they don't have enough time to go through the requirements. And then it becomes a timing issue, right? So you have to be very careful. The first thing to go to is not necessarily your artifacts. You have to be able to, the exam is on the requirements in the exam. And people lose sight of that quite a bit because they focus on the wrong things.
Okay, so I'm a bit pushy and I'm a bit going fast, but it's because we
have a lot of facts to cover. I know, facts and fiction.
So the next one is you need to be able to finish your presentation in the set time of 45 minutes.
Fact or fiction? Let's see what everyone thinks. All right, if you want to click the slide. I think everyone's got this correct. Let's just see, it is fact. You're given that time to present, like you were presenting to a customer. You need to present in that time frame. So yes, that is correct.
And I think this is really a very important one as well, as Suzanne, because it's not always easy to do this. It takes a lot of skill to make sure that you get everything covered within this time frame, but it is really important that you get it covered. We get a question, Suzanne, about what happens if they don't finish on time.
Well, and the question is, what will happen if I don't finish in time? Will the judges allow you to continue in the Q&A? The judges' time is their time, so that's not necessarily a given. It depends. It's their time, so they may or they may not. I would not count on that at all. Your time is 45 minutes. They also have time, and they need to prepare their questions, and that's their 40 minutes. So plan on getting through it in the 45 minutes. And that's practice. That's being concise with your answers. That's looking for time savers on how to present, not spending too much time on your artifacts, spending, making sure that you focus on the requirements that we're looking for.
That you don't repeat too much, that you think about how can you bring as much information in a short amount of time while still being understandable. So maybe a few how not to's that I've seen when I was judging mock review boards, not the actual, because I'm not a CTA judge, but when I was judging the mocks, I saw some people, for example, talking really, really fast, which, yeah, as a judge, I didn't understand half. So that is definitely not the way to go.
Right. Fast is not always the best approach. I think you have to be concise, and you have to learn how to cut down in certain areas and how to really focus in on the important things, which is starting with the requirements.
Yeah, let's go to the next one. Oh, this I've heard a lot. So the judges will ask you trick questions. Fact
Let's see what
or
everyone
fiction?
thinks of this. We've got a mixed bag here, mixed results. All right. Fiction. They're not there to trick you, right? They're there to ask you questions about what you have proposed and what your solutions you're proposing are. It may be to get further explanation. Maybe you didn't explain it properly. Maybe you misread the question. Be very careful and just listen to their question properly. So don't rush listening to that question. Some people just think they hear the first word and they go to an answer. Listen and really understand what the question is asking you before you answer. And it's okay to take a few seconds to think about that.
Yeah, and I also like what Nadina is mentioning in the chat, to think critically. It's indeed, and that's why better sometimes to take a moment, right? To really listen to what they said, understand what are they really asking, because, you have just presented so much. So what specifically is relevant there, and think critically. It's not because they're asking a question about something that, it's wrong or right. It's just trying to understand, right?
Right. And you could have maybe misinterpreted a requirement. Maybe you reread it and think, oh no, that's not what it means. Just regroup, right? Just think through it again. Also, if you're going to make any adjustments, always consider what impact that will have on other things, right? Very important. It may have an impact on something else you've solutioned. So you've got to be able to think that way. And Nadina said it perfectly. You've got to think critically and think, if I make a change, or maybe I just didn't explain it well enough, or how should I just rephrase this? So you've got to think about that question.
All right, let's go to the next one. I should always verify things I hear and read. So I won't spend too much time waiting for this one.
No, you can go to the next slide. I like that from Jay. Hard fact. Yes, that is correct. There's lots of, I'm so excited that there are so many communities, study groups, resources for those on their journey to CTA. That is so exciting for us. The community is so strong. However, there always is some things that out there that you may hear or people may say, and you take it for fact. And it's not, right? Remember, people are going to be commenting on their own journeys, what they've experienced, what they think is true. So just always take everything in. I always say, like, just join every community, listen, absorb all the information, and then you really have to form your own path and your own journey and how you're going to interpret the information you have. So just be careful with things like that. Don't trust everything that you see out there. And we're always here, as Lil said in the beginning. We do have office hours twice a month. For you to ask any questions. So we're always available to clarify anything you need.
And again, I think it's like Nadina mentioned, and I think we'll refer back to it quite a few times. Think critically. This also counts for this, and it counts for both kind of like things you hear about maybe the format or the, what is expected within the CTA Review Board or evaluation. But for me, I think it's also equally important that this counts for things you hear from a knowledge or expertise point of view. For example, I created, my cheat sheets while I was studying, and I have no problem, having other people work on those. But these are my, notes, and I might have missed or misinterpreted something myself. So I'm by no means, a reliable source in that regard. So it should always be, again, verified. So it's really broad.
And the one thing I'll add to that is that, information that's posted, like let's say a blog post or a video or anything else that's out there, may be outdated, right? Like it may be from several years ago, like Willa said, it may be several years ago when the timing was different, when something else was different. So if you take that piece of information and you think it's the truth today, it definitely can kind of skew your preparation a little bit, and you'd have to get back on track. So always read through, if it's dated, I would look at the dates, I would look at things like that to see when was this article written, and then you can kind of put it more into context. Like, what can I grab out of this article that's relevant today? And what do I need to review and make sure that it's, especially program things, we're always changing, the program information. So things like that, I definitely would check.
And yeah, some people have learned hard lessons there. So yeah, for sure, I think a good one. Let's go to the next. If you don't cover a section in the presentation, then it may not be covered in the Q&A. So.
And these are all questions that were submitted. So I'm trying to answer every single one, but what do people think on this?
All right, mostly fiction, some fact. Let's go and see.
It's a fact. Yes, it's a fact. The judges will determine what questions to ask you. And if you haven't covered anything, they're going to start with the information that you have covered. So there may not be time to get to all of the questions. So again, that is fact. If it may not be covered in Q&As, I wouldn't, again, count on it. If, don't think of that. I have sometimes people that go into the Q&A thinking, well, they're going to start this question or they're going to ask me this, and they don't, and they're surprised. So it's up to the judges to determine which questions they're going to ask you, and they may not get to it, or they may not ask you a question you're expecting.
Yeah, and maybe just one point that I have seen in the past is people trying to kind of like maybe hack the exam, or thinking, okay, actually mentioning that I will cover this in the Q&A. Yeah, you might not. So just counting on it, like, I just don't present this and I'll save that time and I'll do it in the Q&A. That's a big risk, because you have no control over that. Q&A is completely up to the judges, right, Suzanne?
Correct. And to our fact, our fiction fact, a couple ago, we said, you must finish your presentation in the 45 minutes. Yes, if you think of it this way, if one person gets to finish their presentation in the Q&A and another one doesn't, it's really not fair, right? So it has to be the format of the exam is maintained so that it is equal for all.
All right, let's go to the next one. The CTA 602 is part of the credential. Fact or fiction?
Let's see what people think of this one.
A lot of fact, only fact.
Only fact. Jay is right. It's fiction. 602 was actually a course that we did up to 2021. We retired that course, which is part of Trailhead Academy, and we created an architect evaluation, which is part of the credential. So one was a course that you went to, and one is a part of the credential, which is evaluated. So they're actually called different things, and this has been a very odd thing that I always see come up, and it's been over 2 years now. So yes, 602 is a retired course.
Could it be, Suzanne, because the one was retired and the other was introduced around the same time, that the confusion is still there?
Probably. And it's similar format, but we have changed the evaluation to align with the credential more. So it was when we first started doing the CTA 602 was to get more hands-on, to get that experience, to get feedback from a CTA directly to help people on their journey. And you'll see more from our team as well. Over the next year or so, we're going to have more resources that we're going to put together for you on your journey. So there'll be more coming. So we're super excited about that. But yes, the 602, we saw it as valuable with that one-on-one, that we wanted to create a more robust architect evaluation that really vets people's readiness to make sure that they're ready for the next step. The architect evaluation is 1/3 the size of the review board exam. So you must be, able to get through the architect evaluation so that we can make sure that you're ready for that larger exam. I don't like seeing people fail. So, that's a really important step now.
Yeah, and I saw some people refer to the evaluation as 602 because it's a cool name. So now we know. But the next one is the Q&A time is for the panel to ask their questions. Fact or fiction?
I'm hoping most people get this correct from our previous questions.
Yeah, they've been paying attention.
They have been. Yes, it is fact. It is up to the panel. Yes, that is 100% fact.
So we'll breeze over this one because I think we covered it already a bit. Then providing a memorizing solution or memorized solution can help you save time. Fact or fiction? Some mix. All right.
Fiction. It is fiction because if you memorize something, this is not a memory exam, right? This is going to be specific requirements, and your solution must address the requirements. If you provide us with a memorized solution, more than likely it will not scale and won't fit into the requirements. It's from another solution. It's from another set of requirements, right? It may be close, but there's going to be things that maybe need to be adjusted. So this providing memorized solutions, and we do see this when people start to run out of time, they just start saying things, right, to see if they can get it. So you have to be precise and make sure that you're in those 3 hours that you have to prepare. This is where, if you remember a solution, you can say, does this apply? How can I make it relevant to these requirements, right? So you must make sure that it is relevant.
Yeah, and I think Anand already put in nice in the chat. What we memorize is to put in the context of a scenario. So just maybe or a piece of experience or how I went about certain things. So as a non-native, sometimes I struggled with really expanding my vocabulary to make it more engaging. I used to use a lot of do's and you's, like the easy words. So I tried to learn more synonyms and expand my vocabulary a bit to make it more engaging for people to listen to me. So that is something that I actively did as a non-native speaker, but it's not the same thing as memorizing, but also sometimes thinking about what are my stop words, or how can I introduce a new requirement, or those, binding words that would help in that regard. Those things, from my experience, this is something that I did work on and memorized a bit. But of course, it's not like full solutions that you're memorizing. It's more helping you speak in a very engaging and yeah, more interesting way.
Yes. And I would say too, memorizing is a word that you should almost take out, right? Because
Mhm.
there's certain things you maybe, patterns and things like that that will help you if you memorize. But solutions, that shouldn't be a memory thing, right? That should be you. I'm going to go back to Nadina's think critically comment. You have to be able to take it and, craft a solution around it, right? And that's not memory. That is what you know, that's your knowledge, right? So
Yeah.
there's a difference between memory and knowledge, right? So we want you, as you go down this journey, to gain more knowledge and to learn more to be an architect, because that learning will help you evolve over time. And if you've learned it once, you're going to eventually just add to that knowledge, right? And it won't become a memorization thing that you have to go back and review. I want it to be kind of second nature.
Yeah, for sure. Because also you're put in a situation, at least also in the Q&A, that there's no room for this. You don't have, the time or the opportunity to just pull out memorized stuff, because you have no clue what they would ask. So
Exactly. I see one more question here. I'll just address it. Do we need to know the Salesforce limit precisely, like exact numbers? So as you're reviewing a scenario, you need to be able to go through the numbers presented and be able to make a decision based on, your knowledge of certain limits. So you should know those limits and what would, you do if it was under this or it was over that. So, the precise limit, exactly the number dead on, no, but you need to know like what to do in certain situations. If something is over, if something is under, how would you solution that for that, right? And explain why you picked your solution. It has to be justified.
let's go to the next one.
Yes, on to number 10.
You can't provide generic answers for the architect evaluation. Oh, I see a comment, Suzanne, that you will want to.
I do too. I'm going to address it.
But I'll go to the answer first.
Yeah. Okay. It is fact. But when you get to this level of exam, and actually one of the things, I'll probably jump ahead, but one of the things that we see a lot is people say, I've got both my prerequisites, I'm ready. No, not necessarily. You've got to take time to do this format of exam, right? So generic answers are not going to get you there at this point. And that's why our team is going to be providing more resources to really help you get there. But generic answers could be canned. It could be something you just guess on. We don't know if you actually know it, right? If you're just giving a generic answer. So we need to make sure that you understand the application of what you're solutioning for. You're able to justify it in the context of the scenario, and it actually works and scales for the customer. At the end of the day, we want you to be great architects for our customers, right? That's the goal. And so we don't want you to get a credential and then not be able to help our customers. So generic answers will not be able to satisfy the requirements for the architect evaluation or the review board exam. And I did want to address that question I saw pop up on points. So there's no such thing as points. You pass or fail. There's nothing that we do that is related to points. And that's a common theme. People think, oh, I'm going to get points if I say this word. I'm going to get a point if I say this. It doesn't work that way. So make sure that you're providing, you're recommending a solution, not options. a solution, you're able to explain how that is going to work for the given requirement and why you're selecting that and not something else, right? How this is going to fix the customer's problem. So it's not just a, it's not a segmented answer like that. You have to provide all those pieces to be able to kind of really get to the point. I see Anna said answers must be explained, like the why. Yes, it's not just a one. If you say this, it's like a point. If you say that, it's a point. It does not work that way because we really want you to be able to explain it. And another thing I'll just say on this is that there can be more than one answer, right? So it depends on how you explain it. It depends on how you solution it. So we have to evaluate how you're presenting it, how you're tying it back to the requirements, how you're justifying it. So it's more than just that.
Yeah, and I think also, not giving anything away, but this is something that for me was certainly a learning throughout the journey is to, okay, I know what the best practices are, but now I have to look at the scenario and justify, still make decisions, because your best practice will not always say it's only this thing is right. You have to then think in the terms of the scenario and the customer and what they need and how, this is going to translate there. That's what I really had to learn when I was going on the journey.
And you said a great point, Lilith. I'll just address it really quickly because I know we've got lots of slides. You said it exactly, is that pretend you're presenting to a customer. Is your customer going to give you points? No, right? So that you're thinking of it as an exam, or are you actually presenting to a customer? That's how we want you to think of this, is you're presenting to a customer and we're seeing how you're doing that, right? That's the intent of this, right? If you start to think of it as an exam and you start to dissect it like that, you lose sight of the purpose sometimes, and people will just start going through like, number one, here's my answer. Number two, here's my answer. Number three, here's my answer. And you see how that's more of a, I'm just responding. I'm just kind of trying to get through this versus a presentation.
It's not engaging, and it doesn't keep the focus and the interest, and it's 45 minutes that you're listening to somebody, so you have to keep them focused and interested, right? They're only human.
All right, let's go on. We have lots.
Yeah. You need to change your solution at least once in the Q&A.
This is a new one for me. This is a new one. I hadn't seen this one before.
Oh, okay.
Some mixed ones in here. And it's fiction. So again, it's not we're not, the Q&A portion of the exam or of the evaluation is not for you to adjust necessarily your decision, right? You've got to listen, critical thinking again, to the question and make sure, what they're asking, and kind of think through, read again the requirement and really think through it. It may be that you're going to stay with that, right? So this is definitely fiction because it's not, we don't look at anything like this. Did they change it at least once? That has nothing to do with anything. You may not change it at all. You may not change it. You may change it. You may change several things, and that's still okay if they're adjusted correctly. So it really, there's no template for the Q&A portion. And this to me is a template question, right? I must do this.
Yeah, and so it's also not at least 3 times, Stuart. But I'm sure you were joking, so. Let's go to the next one. If your Q&A ends early, this indicates that you will pass. Fact or fiction? Oh, we got some quick responses on this one. You want to answer?
Yeah, let's go to the answer. Fiction.
This was one from me.
Yes, the judges have up to that amount of time, so they don't necessarily need to use the whole time. If they run out of questions, if you really want, they can think up other questions, but it's not necessary for them to. Like, so it is no indication of the exam result.
Yeah, no, so maybe just to add, this is one that came from me because I thought this, right? This was one that I brought up and it really surprised you, right, Suzanne?
Yeah, it was. So this does not mean either that you're doing extremely well or extremely badly. This just means that they have no further questions, right? Plain and simple. It's not, there's no gauge for us to determine that. It is purely up to the judges. They have up to that amount of time to ask you questions.
I like the next question from Anna. Have you seen it?
Yes, does it? Oh, do the judges already make up their mind during the Q&A, or do they have an assessment later after the exam? So great question. The judges do go back and they do spend about 1 to 2 hours reviewing everything. So it is not something that is done on the spot. Definitely not. There's a lot. If you think about it, you're presenting for 45 minutes. Many of you talk really fast. So we have to kind of review everything that you've done, the artifacts you presented that should be aligned to your requirements. And, you know, the judges do confer afterwards regarding the results.
So I got a question, but it's in a direct message, but it's about when they are conferring, at that point, do they look at the artifact? So what are they reviewing? If you're...
Yeah, unfortunately for the judging portion of that, I'm not going to be talking about that during this. I mean, that's a completely confidential part of it. But just rest assured the judges do kind of go back and take care of, you know, reviewing everything. So.
Okay, and it's best that you put messages in the public chat, and way Suzanne can see them and pick them up as well, because I might have missed some. So.
Yes, that'd be great.
All right, shall we go to the next?
Yeah, let's go to the next one.
So now we've come to the questions. So we've had our facts, fiction statements, but we have a few questions that were also submitted. So the first one is, will there be an announcement when the scenario structure will be changed? Okay,
great question. And I've had this quite a bit. Lilith brought it to me as well. So the exam guide has not changed, right? The scenario is the requirements for the exam. So if you follow the exam guide, you should be able to answer any scenario that's put forth in front of you, regardless of the format, regardless of the number of words, regardless of, you know, the font, regardless of the spacing. I get people all the time that when I moved it from single spaced to like double spaced, they thought, you know, we'd increase the size of the scenario, and we hadn't. We just did that so that people wouldn't skip over sections, because what I was finding was people were reading, and because it was single spaced, they actually would jump to the next paragraph. So in order to help, we extended it with the font and with the spacing, and then everyone was upset because then it was longer, not technically longer, but appeared longer. So the format of the scenario should not matter, right? So there is not going to be, we're not doing any announcement because it shouldn't matter for the scenario structure.
Okay, and I see no follow-up questions on that, so I think we can go to the next one.
Okay. Well, the next one's related, you know, regarding scenarios. We always do provide scenarios throughout the year. Probably due for another one soon. There are so many scenarios out there that are great. I think they're all fantastic to practice with. I would just make sure that you're potentially looking at the ones that we have in our architect community as, you know, one of the last ones you do, to make sure you're covering all the areas. I don't know if some of the ones in the community have all the points necessary for an exam. So I just wouldn't want anyone to be, expecting, X type of scenario, and then they get more requirements or requirements around something else, right? So all of the scenarios that are in our community are past exams, right? Exams that we have released to the public for practice purposes. Right. And one of the questions was, where do you find them? So we have the resources later, but in the Architect Trailblazer community on the right-hand side, we have a list of all the scenarios there that you can download and use.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with everything that you've just said, of course. But one of the things that just from my how I went about it is I did some of the other scenarios too, because you want to have that, practice that clean sheet, let's say, going into a scenario, reading a document, not knowing what to expect. So I think it's always important to really keep in mind, how do you want to go about, where are you on your journey? At that point, I was really just in the preparation, still refining my style. But as you get closer, you need to indeed make sure that you have realistic scenarios to practice upon. So those in the community are indeed great for that. Let's go to the next one. Is it important to provide a company intro or overview?
I'm going to let Lilith answer this one.
Okay, no, that's
what do you think,
fine.
Lilith?
So, I think, and this is me talking from, when I'm a judge in the mocks, of course, I like to have at least a bit of an intro into what is this company. Again, tying it back to what Suzanne mentioned earlier about how would you present to an actual customer. Of course, they already know what their company does, but because you're going to tell them their story about their requirements and their processes and how your solution fits in, I always like to at least know a bit more about the company, and you also highlighting maybe which elements are important there. But what is really important for me, and what I really do not like, is if people just copy paste part of paragraphs into a presentation, because it doesn't feel personalized. As a customer, I also would not like that. So that's my answer to this, Suzanne.
Yeah, I think it's important to set the stage, right? Like, who are you talking? If you're going to go up to a customer, are you just going to get right into it? Or are you going to say, I've really listened to what you've presented, and I want to provide you with some my recommendations, but just so I paint a clearer picture, here is what my understanding of the basic structure of the company, and then I'll get into, can be really short. It doesn't have to be super long. I don't recommend it to be long. Obviously, you need to start focusing on the requirements. So just, like a small little intro. Another thing on this too, I've seen some people in the past go into more intro on themselves. I would also eliminate that completely, right? It's more important to do an intro on a small intro on what you're going to be presenting, rather than talk about yourself, as time is so limited.
And this might be some place where it's very different for when you go to a customer there. Of course, you have to at least introduce yourself maybe a bit more than in this situation, right, Suzanne?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
All right. For the architect evaluation, can I present generic information? I think this is similar to a statement that we discussed.
It was, yes. So we can go forward on that one.
All right. What is the ideal timeline to attain your CTA credential?
All right. If everyone wants to post what they think it is in the Slack group, in the chat window, that'd be great. What do you think it is? What's your ideal time frame? Oh, I love it. That's so great. Yes, that's exactly correct. It depends, right? It's your journey. I can't stress that enough. There's no timeline. Some people it's going to take longer, and that's okay, right? It's not something, this is not a credential that you rush to complete. If you're rushing to complete it, it may not be the right credential for you. And I really want you to think about, why you're going to get this, why you want to get it. This is all about your experience. It's about applying your experience to customer situations and customer problems and being able to tackle those, right? And so that takes time, it takes experience, it takes knowledge. And definitely the format of this credential, this exam, takes some time too, right, to practice your timing. But I've been told by many people now, and some that haven't passed, right, that have come to me and said, I am a better architect because I'm going through this process. I'm learning more. And every time I start, preparing and looking at different scenarios, it becomes more muscle memory. So this will help you. And I know if you're thinking you're on the journey and it's been a long time, don't worry, keep at it, and you will see the end eventually. But all of that training and knowledge will help you in the long run.
I couldn't agree more. And I really want to emphasize what you have been saying there, Suzanne, about the growth that people go through while they are on this journey. I think that is really not something to underestimate, and the growth that you go through as a person in your knowledge, but also your soft skills, which especially for people who may come from a more technical background, who don't always have the opportunity to engage with business stakeholders, sometimes that's really something that they need to improve upon. But also what I really, really liked is the fact that you get such a great network, because you're really, engaging with people within the community. You're trying to find judges to, judge your next mock so that you get some more feedback and you learn to work with feedback. So you get so many valuable skills. And I think that is the most important part, that you learn how to interact, get feedback, do something with that, and really grow.
Exactly.
Oh, I do see a nice one. How do you know you're ready? Oof, that's a tough one.
Well, so you definitely need to practice, right? And I think a lot of these communities that are out there now have a lot of study groups that you can practice your presentations in. I think you must start to present, and even if you're terrible at first, I remember when I first started doing my first one, when I was, preparing, I was awful. You're nervous, like there's things come up. The first one's always going to be terrible. And then you get more comfortable, and then you start getting into a rhythm, and you're able to read a scenario and pull out the critical requirements. And so it's practice, right? It's practicing how to do that, and start slow, start with like smaller scenarios and build up. But I think it's practice as much as you can. And then as you feel more comfortable, I think you will know. I don't think you need someone to tell you. I mean, I'm sure you're going to get feedback in the community of how you're doing, but I think you will know when you're ready to go. Like, you'll know when that is.
Yeah. I think for me as well, it was really about the first times, that during the preparation, during when you're trying to solve, you're seeing so many gaps. You're actually sometimes coming into obstacles where you're prevented from being super confident about a particular solution because you have a technical, knowledge that is missing there. Or then the next step is the time management. So you're
Right.
feeling more comfortable in the technical side, but you're still crunching for time. And it's not going as smoothly. So it's these reiterations and finally feeling comfortable in, you have a solution that you feel comfortable defending, you feel comfortable presenting. I think that's when you start, that's when you're ready. That would be my definition.
Right. I see some comments here I'll address. So I am not a CTA. I was going down that path, but then I took over the program. So not really appropriate to be taking the exam that you are now in charge of. So I am not. But great question. I haven't been asked that actually in a long time. And the other question that I see there is, you're ready when you can solve the mocks in 3 hours. Incorrect. I think when you can present in 45 minutes, that would be a better test. You definitely should be trying to solve the mocks in 2 hours, right? When we added that third hour, that's actually to help you prepare your presentation. So my guidance would be, try to do that longer mock in 2 hours, right? That's actually what many of our CTAs had to do, was 2 hours. So don't count on 3. I think that extra hour should just be for review, how you're going to present, preparing your kind of how you're going to order everything, get everything lined up. Maybe 2.5, but the half hour should definitely be on the presentation. So work on that. And then I guess I am the guardian of the CTAs. Thanks, Jay. Introvert.
Maybe,
yes.
Maybe to jump on for one last moment on what you were mentioning about the preparation and how you should spend that time. And I agree.
Sure.
It shouldn't be 3 hours of solutioning. And I think that's also, again, you need to have some kind of milestones in your head or like benchmarks that you work towards. So by then I need to at least, be this far along in solving the requirements so that you can pick up the pace and you don't realize too late in the game that you've lost too much time. I think that's an important part of that time management as well.
Yes, exactly. In just talking about the, anyone that has like anxiety, I think it's definitely manageable. I think it's just practice, right? Like, don't worry about that part of it. We do see all types of folks at the review board. We see, definitely if you're not nervous at this exam, we're kind of wondering, if something's wrong, because we've had a few people not nervous at all, like very, very okay. And we're like, this is very odd, because usually people are nervous, right? So it's normal to be nervous. It's normal to be anxious for this level of exam, quite normal. I think, and Lilith, you can tell me, and Nadina, you can tell us too, if our team tries to put you at ease, right? Like, so the proctors that are there, it's a very high touch credential. So meaning that, we're definitely queuing in with you, making sure you're okay, calming you down at times when we have to. So we try to do that along the way. And even with the judges, they're very lovely. They're not going to be, mean or yelling or anything like that. So they actually also bring a calm, like, demeanor to the situation.
And everyone's anxiety or nervousness, so to put it, shows in a different way. So I get even more talkative. I make even more jokes, which is not good. But everyone has it in their own different way. And for me, it was a lot of practicing again and going into situations. For example, you have some groups which do mocks with quite a broad audience. That's very, very scary, but it makes it less scary to do mocks after, because you've done that. You conquered that one. So it's about conquering those small things for yourself, which make it less and less scary and more manageable. And also learning, how does your anxiety or your nervousness show, and how can you work with that to, make sure that you're still coming across and presenting your solution. Because you need to do this for customers too.
Exactly. I think that also the more you practice, hopefully, those that are a little anxious or like nervous about presenting, you can also try like Toastmasters and, try and present at your company if you get an opportunity. Put yourself in those situations in maybe a smaller group. Even these study groups is a great way to kind of just start with that anxiety and learn how to kind of control it or try to minimize it as much as possible. It may not ever go away, but that's okay. We know we expect people with anxiety, nervousness, that's a normal part of this exam. So it's all about the control too. And if you focus on your presentation and you practice, I think you should be fine.
Shall I go to the next question, or do you want to check if we have some more in the
chat? Why don't you go to the next question? I do see one more. I'm going to answer real quickly. How many times should I read the scenario? Again, that depends on you, right? If you're able to, if you do a thorough reading of it the first time, maybe only once. If you skim it the first time, you're going to need to go through it again, right? So again, that's something that you need to figure out what your best practice is for you, how you read through a document and how you're able to pull that information out. Great question, though. All right, if I have both the
Uh,
prerequisites
mhm.
for the credential, are you ready to sign up? Sorry, I took your
No, it's fine. So
question.
I'll take your role for a moment, and then you tell
There
me
you
if
go.
I'm saying fact or fiction.
Okay.
So this was one of the ones that I had in the beginning. So I thought if I go through the pyramid, then, the last thing is the smallest part of the pyramid. So that should be the shortest, so I should be ready. So that is, no, if you have both prerequisites, likely you're really not ready yet because of everything that Suzanne also just mentioned, practicing in the community, really making sure that you can, go through this scenario in time, solution it correctly, justify or correctly, at least in a solid way, and present it in such a short amount of time. So probably not. That would be my answer, Suzanne.
Correct. Probably not. It's a different type of exam, right? You're going from a multiple choice exam. What is the limit of this? What is this? What is that? Multiple choice question to you're having to propose a recommendation with, a solution that has, you're able to explain how it works, how it's going to fix the problem, and why you picked it, right? And making sure that you scale it. And is this something that the customer is going to be able to use for a month or 6 months, or like how are you scaling this solution, right? So you're thinking about more of the bigger picture from an architecture standpoint, and then you have throughout the scenario many things to consider as well, and all the risks and everything else. So very different from a multiple choice exam, definitely different kind of preparation that's involved.
Yeah, and I think Marlene put a good anecdote in the chat where she mentioned that she had passed her IM certification in April, but she realized that she kind of skipped some areas where maybe, okay, you have surface level knowledge, but not deep enough, as Suzanne was explaining, to really solution from scratch. So then you'll need to dive in and study a bit more. It's the same thing for me. I had to really go back to some of those domains that I had, passed the certification on, because you need to have that deeper level knowledge.
Yeah, I really like that post too, Marlene, is that it's okay to go back, right? Don't think that you've passed it, it's in the past, right? If you did it too quickly, or maybe, you didn't really know, but you guessed correctly on the multiple choice, which could happen, and you don't know that concept, definitely go back, because you will need it for, the CTA credential, right? And you want to learn, and you want to keep building that knowledge. Again, if you don't know it and you have to go back, that's where we want to kind of help you build that knowledge throughout your journey. Okay, I see a couple other questions here. I just want to address some. I think we're still good on time, Lilith. So I'll go back to Frank's comment here for you, Lilith. How formal do you have to be? And I think that was regarding
my jokes. I didn't make jokes during my presentation, just to clarify. I think
okay.
I'm okay in saying that without violating the NDA rights.
Yes, you're fine.
So no, it's just something that I tend to do. So I need to keep it in mind that I don't do this when I'm under pressure. So is that enough of an answer? Or other than that, it's like you address a customer, which is,
correct.
Some formality at least, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I'll answer a few more here, and then we'll go to the next question. So this is getting back to question number 6. If the section not covered in the presentation may not be covered in Q&A, how does it impact your result? Well, it would impact it negatively, right? So that's why we stress that you should be covering everything in the 45 minutes. Very important to plan that way, and to plan for the credential in that format. Unfortunately, if you don't talk about something, it's hard for the judges to know if you know that area or not, right? Is there a site portal we can see the current lead times for both review boards? I'm going to be getting to that question soon. Thanks, Rohit. And for the evaluation as well. And I think we're up to, well, thank you, Anna, for posting that. That's nice. give yourself a chance. I like that. ARC 101, ARC 902. Okay. Yes, ARC 901 and ARC 902 are combination courses that cover most of our content for the domains. So definitely great way to do refreshes is you can always join a class. Those classes are fantastic, and most of them are led by CTAs or by Amit, or lovely, expert instructor, master instructor. So definitely a great way to kind of fine tune, review anything is by signing up for one of our courses. Absolutely. All right, and I'm getting down to how many people have passed the exam so far. So I guess, Victor, you're referring to the review board, referring to the credential in total, correct? I believe so. Yes.
I think so, yeah.
Well, the CTA test has two things, right? So the evaluation is the first part, and then the review board is the second part. So if they pass both, then they become a certified technical architect. So the certified technical, today we have less than 450 in the world. And I'm always going to give an answer that is is not a number, because it changes constantly. And I've been quoted several times in the past when I've given a number, they put that in a document. And I'm like, oh, don't do that. So I'm always just very general about that, because it does change. So a year ago, there were less than 470. Incorrect. Not true.
Well, 450 is also less than 470. So it depends on how you look at it, I guess.
Oh, but that's true. That's true. But yes, 470 is not, that's not a true statement. So, okay. Well, let's go on to the next question, since we've answered this. I think I've answered most of the ones in here.
How can I book the architect evaluation and select a day?
Well, so you don't have to book an architect evaluation. So you have to go into Web Assessor or into Criterion, and you have to register, right? It is part of the credential. So you basically have to go in. It will only allow you to register if you have the two prerequisites. If you don't, the system will not even let you register. So it checks on those things. And how we're working the architect evaluation is you register. When you register, you should be ready to take the evaluation in the next 2 to 4 weeks, not in a year from now, not in 6 months from now, 2 to 4 weeks. What happens next is that when you register, you'll get an email asking if you're going to be ready in 2 to 4 weeks. If you are, then we assign you an evaluator, and that evaluator will be in touch with you to schedule your evaluation in that 2 to 4 week time frame, right? So you will work with the evaluator to select a date in that time frame. Okay. Now, why is it important to book it when you're ready and not wait? We don't want to have your registration on hold for a long time. And we do find that people that do that register and go, oh, I'm not going to be ready for 6 months. That 6 months usually becomes 8 months, becomes a year. They keep pushing it. So that's somebody who may have a date or something in their mind of when they want to be ready, but that's not when they are ready, right? There's no need to book this early. We have plenty of space for our architect evaluations. It has, in the past, when we didn't have this in place, we did have a long queue, huge queue, long. So I understand that probably some people still think there is a queue. There is not. People are now being very careful when they book this, because if you do not pass the evaluation, you must wait 6 months before you can reapply. Okay, so we want to make sure you're prepared instead of just trying it, right? Because it is a lot of resources, one-on-one with the CTA, or for the board, it's 3 CTAs. So we want to make sure that you are prepared. Okay, and I think
We can go to the next one.
Yes, let's go to the next one. I'm reading through some of the questions. So don't worry if we haven't gotten to your question in the meeting chat, we will get to that. Is
You've
there a
answered
queue?
this one.
I
Right?
did as of, yeah, so no queue, no queue. We do request that you are ready when you register. So there's no sense in paying for a voucher or, registering for it if you're not ready. Okay, will the credential be updated in the near future? Oh, this is a fun one, right? So we're always thinking of ways to update and keep the credential current. The way I like to explain this too is that we want to make sure that when you pass and you become a certified technical architect, you're able today to go in and help our customers with the problems that they're facing today, right? So we've got to always adjust and make sure that the scenarios are being written in a way that include things that are current products, that are current things that are available, so that you can answer them appropriately. So we do constantly kind of adjust to make sure that that is aligned with a current credential. Okay. With the focus being on like security and solution architecture, data, and other products that we have in the exam guide. So as you go through the exam guide, the information in there will help you understand what we're looking for.
Sorry, I was reading up
you're
a bit on the.
Why don't we continue the questions, and then we'll in the questions here, and then we'll go to the questions in the chat before we go to the resources. Yeah.
All right.
Keep the questions coming, please. That's great in the chat.
Can you skip questions in the Q&A portion of the architect evaluation or architect review board exam?
So you can't, like, if you're not sure of a question, I wouldn't say I'd like to skip it. I would say, I would try and think through the situation first instead of just, saying I'm going to go to the next question, because we have no information. If you just say I'm going to skip it, is it like a lack of knowledge in that area, or do you know it and you're just not sure? So just have a conversation, or just kind of explain what your thoughts are on that. And you can say, I think it's this, or, this, I'm not sure about this question, but here's what I think I would do. Offer something instead of just saying skip, because we do see sometimes people say skip, pass, skip, skip, skip. And obviously, if you do that too often, we really are not sure if you have the knowledge needed, right, to answer those questions. Okay.
Yeah, and maybe just an addition there from my side is that it's not because you're, explaining things. That is a vastly different thing from inventing things. So it's not about pressuring you to answer. It's about getting an idea on how you're thinking, in my opinion. So it doesn't mean that you have to like just blurt out something that, may or may not be true, because that will not help you at all.
Yes. And one thing that I failed to mention earlier is about this question. You may not know everything, right? There's many CTAs today that they didn't know an answer to a question either. And that's okay, right? As an architect, you're always learning. You're always going to be learning new things, new products, new ways to do things. That's part of being an architect. So no one has ever gotten every question 100% correct, ever. So it's okay, right? But again, don't go through too many without providing some kind of answer, right?
So we have some tips and reminders. Do we want to go to them immediately, or first check if we have some questions?
Let's check the chat, because I think we've missed a few here. So let's. Do you want to just call them out to me, and I'll.
Yeah. I'll just go from the latest one, or the most recent one. Will the review board go back to offering in-person presentations?
Oh, that's a great one. I really want to. So we're working on that now. It's funny, we did a small test, and I'm worried that if we offer in-person review boards, I would have to have so many people go to that, actually physically go. So if people just decide, no, I want to do it virtually, then I have a situation where I don't know if I can have enough people to fulfill like an in-person board. I'd love to go back in person. I think it also depends on volume. Like if I have more people that want exams, yeah, I may have to go back in person to fulfill that. So more to come on that. It's not off the table, but right now we're just reviewing and making sure that it works for everyone. That's a great question.
Oh, I love one that just came in. So I'm heavily addicted to coffee. Is or will drinking coffee be allowed on the CTA exam?
Yes, you can. I've had some interesting requests over the years, but yes, you can bring in like anything to drink, probably not alcoholic beverages, but anything else is fine during the exam. No problem. Snacks, like if that's what you need. We obviously don't want you passing out during the exam. So that's something that you definitely can bring in, usually people have some water with them all the time, no problem. Even if it's virtual, like we make sure that you have your setup, you have water and you have, a snack if you need it. And during your break, you can go up and get more coffee if you want, if you don't have a coffee machine like right there. So you definitely can do that.
Yeah, and the next one that he had was, sorry, let me scroll up, is whether they can ask the judges for additional questions about the feedback after they receive the CTA result email.
Yeah, so no, you cannot, but there is a mechanism that you can request additional feedback. So you basically, if you read your result email, pass or fail or section retake, you can schedule time with our team to review any questions you may have. Unfortunately, you do not get more time with the judges. As you can imagine, that's a resource, a heavy request, and they're quite busy. So we do not involve them in any part of the exam after their judging responsibilities. A great question.
And just to reiterate, because I see a question from Anna, now all the boards are virtual, right? At this point?
Correct. They are for the time being, correct.
All right, going through some more of the questions. Yeah, there's a question about the passing rate on the review board.
My favorite question. It's my favorite. It's my favorite. So the pass rate depends on you, right? It's your success is the only thing you need to be concerned about. Because if somebody comes to the review board and they're not ready, then you're looking at somebody who has not prepared, who is bringing down the quote unquote pass rate, right? And it's not, you shouldn't look at that. You shouldn't be looking at that at all. You need to be looking at your own success, your own journey, right? So that's really important. And that's why you can't think of this as like a multiple choice exam. Multiple choice exams, you're looking at the pass rate, right? You can't look at the pass rate for this because it depends. And I've had people too that come to this exam and they're brilliant architects. It could just be the day wasn't their day, right? They read the scenario wrong. They drew a blank when they got to the exam. I know it's happened to me when I was in school. It happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to many of you where you're just like, I don't know the answer to this, right? So it happens, especially with a high pressure exam like this. People put a lot of stress on themselves. Very common, unfortunately, right? So preparation, and like Lilith, I think you said, mentally being prepared.
Yeah.
Very important, right, for this?
Yeah, for sure, indeed. And that's why putting yourself in kind of, well, you're never going to find a fully similar situation, but at least as close as you can get through those mocks in the community, even before some audiences, it's important to, understand how you deal with stress, how stress affects you, and how you can manage it in such a situation.
Absolutely.
I also saw an interesting question I missed earlier. So if you fail evaluation, you can't retake for 6 months, as Suzanne already explained as well. Does it apply for the board as well?
So the review board, if you do not pass the review board exam, we recommend minimum 4 months, right? So if you failed it, you definitely need to go back, redo your preparation, focus on the areas you need to work on. that can't be done in like a month, like, you know, on top of everything else you've got going on. You need to really focus. So minimum would be 4 months that we would allow you back to take the second part. You would not have to take the evaluation again if you've already passed it. So if you pass the evaluation, you're good for that portion of the exam.
I like the next question I'm going to ask.
Okay.
It's about Ruth, and everyone loves Ruth. So will the newly minted CTAs get Ruth the mascot?
Yeah. So we do have a gift that we give our CTAs when they pass. It is not Ruth, but Ruth is out there. I think stock has come back in the Trailhead store, so you are able to purchase Ruth online. She's back. I know she was gone for a while. I think
she's a popular girl.
Very popular, yes.
So I'm sure there's a few more questions that I missed, and we will get to them, but I'm looking at the time, and I do think it's important that we go through some tips and reminders, as well as some of the awesome resources that we have curated, or you have curated actually. So let's go through the tips and reminders.
Yeah, so practice. Yeah, I'll go ahead. Practice your time management, right? So this is a big thing we see a lot of the time, both with the preparation, right? So practice how you're going to use that time efficiently, and stick to a plan, right? Now, with the evaluation, that's a little bit shorter, right? So you have to kind of adjust. We do have a scenario out there that's specifically for the evaluation. So make sure you're preparing with that kind of length of evaluation. And then the review board is different with the timing. So very important to prepare for both with those timings. Presentation, slightly different again. You only have 30 minutes for the evaluation, and you have 45 minutes for the full. So just different ways and techniques on how you're going to approach that. Q&A, same thing. I will say a couple other things with this, but 30 minutes for the Q&A for the evaluation currently, and 40 minutes for the review board. Now, all these timings that we're talking about during this presentation as well, those are the current program time. So if anything changes and you're watching this a little bit later, maybe in a year or two from now, which I hope you are, but you know, those might be things you want to double check, right? In any presentation or video presentation that you see. Regards to Q&A, you know, how to do your time management. We talked a little bit about skipping questions. Another thing I see a lot of is people ask is, did they actually ask another question to the judges? So remember, that time is the judge's time to ask you questions, right? So I would refrain as much as possible from repeating anything or asking the judges another question. Like, did that satisfy your answer? I mean, I know it seems like not a lot, but if you do that after every single question, you could be eating away at time that they could have asked you another question at the end, right? So think of it that way, right? Let the judges control the Q&A. For the presentation, you definitely are in charge of that piece. Make sure that you are, like we said earlier, that you're using this time to answer the requirements and use the artifacts as your, you know, documents, your reference documents. So as you're going through a requirement, say, oh, let's hop over to the data model, right? And so we see people spending way too much time on their artifacts in the beginning, that they've almost eaten up half of their presentation time, and they haven't even addressed any requirements. So as you can imagine, if you're in that situation, you may not get through all the requirements, right? Or you may start going through the requirements and only giving a solution and not justifying anything, right? So you're rushing, you start to rush, you start to talk faster. Another thing I see in the presentation is that if you're really passionate about an area, you really know this area really well, you're going to talk a little bit more in that area than you will on something you don't know as well, right? So watch yourself with that too, and don't spend too much time on, let's say if it's data, you're spending way too much time on data because you love that area, you're focused on that area, and you're like, I'm not going to talk about these things because I'm not as sure about them. So still try and pace yourself. And then going back again to the preparation, make sure you look at the time, make sure you're not drawing any standard artifacts, right? They must relate to the requirements. So I know I noticed in here, one question was about, and I'm not going to answer the question exactly, but it was about a requirement in an evaluation about let me see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, here it is, release plan requirements. There may or may not be a requirement on that in your evaluation, or in your evaluation, there will not be anything on governance, but in your review board, there may not even be a requirement on that, right? So read through, make sure the requirements that you're answering the requirements in this scenario. And the reason why we don't have governance and communication in our evaluation is we just want to make sure that you focus on a smaller subset of those areas. So that's why we excluded those two. All right, I'll go to the next one, and then we can answer questions at the end when we've finished everything. I think Nadina must have seen this slide because develop your critical thinking on how to solve for various requirements. This is like the #1 thing, right? You have to come in and solve these requirements. That should be the focus of this exam. And I've over the years, I've seen people deviate to like artifact focus or timing focus, or, how many papers do I have, or the color of my pens, everything but this point, right? So make sure that you're focused on the exam, right? And we don't really mind if your lines aren't straight in your artifacts, if they're a little crooked. That's not what this exam is about. We're not here to, for the exam as well, even for those whose English is not their first language, it's not about seeing how well you can explain things in English either. That is very secondary, right? We want to make sure you can solve it. We'll work with you on obviously, any language issues like that if we have to repeat something, but we're not focused on that, right? So I want everyone to know that that's not the main focus. It is the exam. The third one is work on your own approach, right? Again, great to have the community, great to have information everywhere. I love it. I really do. And every day people are like, can you review this deck? Can you review this blog to make sure I'm saying the right things? I'm happy to do that with everybody. And for those that don't review it, it's totally fine to post things. I love the community aspect of this. This is what's made the architect community so big, is this whole aspect of giving and sharing and helping people. So I love, love, love this. Learn the topics and be able to understand the use case and application. Yes, very important. We don't want to just know the solution. I'm going to use skinny tables. Why? How does it work? What does it mean? Be able to explain it, right? If you don't know that, then you shouldn't be offering it up as a solution. Sometimes we get people just saying a solution and they have no idea what it is. And we ask them to explain it and they have no clue, right? So if you're going to say something in the exam or the evaluation, the judges may ask you a question on it, right? So be prepared, right? So that's very important. Focus on what matters in your presentation. And this goes back to the first one a little bit, like the requirements. Don't focus so much on the artifacts, make those as like supporting documents. Make sure you're able to get through all of the areas that you need to, all the requirements in the time frame you have. And then also join office hours for any additional questions, right? So that is always available to you. It's been available for years now. I sometimes get no people. I sometimes get one person. So this is just any questions you may have as we, launch new initiatives and new things and change things in the credential process. We see an uptick in people coming, right? I don't understand how this works. But you can come anytime. We still have that available, and I have one coming up, I think, next week.
Yeah, and Nadina stressed how useful this is in the chat, and I was one of your frequent customers there. So this is really, I think, just a very useful one. And then Frank, in the next slide, which I will just pull up, we have the link to the Architect Trailblazer community. So, and there you'll find the link to the office hours as well.
Yes, we can leave this up, and we can talk through it. Any other questions that we have in here, that'd be great.
Yeah, we have some technical questions, so I'll just kind of bunch them all together about asking, do you need 2 cameras? And what if I have more than 1 screen? How does that work?
Yeah.
Do I have a minimum network speed? I'm pretty sure there's no measure for that right now.
Let me walk through that, and hopefully you can tick off a few of these questions, Lilith, as I'm doing that. So for the evaluation and for the review board, we have the same format. You need an external camera, 1 external camera. You're only allowed to use 1 screen. So if you have 3 screens, 2 must be turned off or unplugged. So yes, 1 screen. We will be watching the screen and your area as well. You will be using a remote computer. So you will be using our computer. So we'll give you mouse control of that computer for those of you that don't know. You're not able to access any documentation online. You're only going to be visible is the screen that we're sharing you. Every paper that you have must be blank. So you may not have any additional supporting documents. It's blank paper, like you were going into a testing center. At the end, we will ask you to rip up anything you've noted. The scenario is online, so there's no ability to print anything that would go against our security policy for this exam.
So you've already answered the print question. There is one more, and I think it's an interesting one in the virtual format indeed. What if there's a network issue or something,
Sure.
You lose something?
Yeah. So, and I'll address that bandwidth issue too. We hope that you're in a strong bandwidth area. We have noticed that there's some countries actually that have different variations of bandwidth. And so that has been an impact a little bit. Generally speaking, it's not terrible. We use Zoom, so you can always practice, with that. But I would recommend if you can hardwire into your network, that's always better than Wi-Fi, but Wi-Fi we've had no problems either. So it's just a personal decision there. We ask that you be off of any VPN so that the bandwidth might be, okay. If there's any issue, so you're with a proctor, if there's an internet issue that happens, we do exchange information on how to get back online. And if you're not able to get back online, which it's only happened, I think, twice in since we started doing virtuals back in 2020, so 3 years now we've been doing it, someone's internet went down. Nothing we can do about that, right? Nothing at all. So we would stop the exam. We would reschedule you as soon as possible. And typically that's pretty quick virtually. And obviously you get a different exam, right? You wouldn't get the same one. So that would be the situation. Now, if we can get you back up and running within a short amount of time, we will. Short probably means within, I'd say 20 to 30 minutes max. The reason I say that is, number one, we have a schedule to keep with the judges. They have specific times they're booked for. And number two, your nerves can really get to you if you're sitting there not knowing if something's not working for 30 minutes, right? Plus then you're not in the right frame of mind. And we don't want you to take that exam if you are not comfortable, continuing. So we'll also ask you that. Right. So a couple things go into that. We make that decision on at that instant, whatever happens. If I've had some people say, nope, let's continue. And I've had another person go, we couldn't continue because of the internet issue. So I've had both ways. But again, very, very, very few, only 2 that I have noted that have happened to, where we've lost internet. A great question.
So we had another slide with additional resources because there's quite a few. And I also see that we're at time. So I propose that any additional questions that are there, they can bring to the office hours of next week or somewhere close. Is that okay for you, Suzanne?
Yes, that'd be fine. Also, I'm going to just keep this chat and all the questions. If you'd like me to reach out to you directly, I'm going to put my email in the chat window. And if you want to just email me the questions, or like if you don't mind me emailing you back, let me know. Just send me your email so that I can respond back to you. That would be great.
All right, so I think that's indeed a good idea to put the email in the chat, because I don't want to hijack any more of your time, Suzanne. You've been really, really kind in joining us and answering all these questions. So thank you so much for doing so. And I see from the chat, it was very engaging. A lot of people got a lot of information out of it. So thank you again so much for joining us.
No problem. And again, you know, if there's any questions, either you can email me directly if you're not comfortable with putting it in the chat. Some people aren't, and that's fine. Or if you're not comfortable with coming to like an office hours that we have with other people, happy to connect with you separately on this. But yes, I will be looking at all the questions. And if I haven't answered anything in here, Lilith and I will consolidate them all and see what we can do to come up with this as well. Okay.
Will do. Thank you so much, Suzanne, and thank you everyone for joining. And yeah, have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.